Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and this is Trauma Informed Prevention Services of the Inland Empire, TIPS IE. And today, joining me, we have Joyce, Clarke, Shor, Denny, Tamika, Carter, and James "That Yoga Dude" Woods. And as always, we're looking to bring new information, insight to what's going on with regards to, well, frankly, the Inland Empire and the trauma that we have to endure, either from our youth all the way to adults, as we just sort of manage getting through this time, this window, this pandemic. So, without further ado, today we're going to talk about alone versus loneliness. And I'm going to defer to Joyce Clarke to really define that distinction as we start really unwrapping what that means for our community. Joyce.
Thank you, Glenn. Always a pleasure to be here and talk about these various issues, especially from a humanistic and mental wellness lens. Lorna Heck, the therapist, said that humans are social animals who absolutely depend on connection for emotional health. So I looked up loneliness and alone. And loneliness is the state of being alone and feeling sad about it and anxious about it. That's loneliness. Alone is without anyone or anything else, not involving anyone or including anyone that you might usually be with. So it is more of a choice to be alone. The difference again is loneliness makes you sad, anxious, and you probably crave company. But alone is more of a choice. And it just actually defines the condition you are in because you've made that choice.
See. So the lens I think we want to approach this is something that's happening in this very dynamic window of time where kids are back at school, parents are working or not working, and they're managing the virtual environment. And then you have grandparents who are now involved in something new. I mean, they have even more time not having to deal with this virtual world. But my goodness, good grandparents love their kids and their kids are being traumatized. Grandparents and grandkids, how are they now navigating each other in this new normal?
That's crazy, isn't it? Because the one thing that you love the most may be the one thing you need to stay away from. You know, if you're kind of looking at it, it's kind of traumatic, as you said, on both sides. The little one that's used to being around Mima is wondering why Mima is not around. And then the Mima on the other side could be, through your definitions, alone. But they're not. They're lonely because they're used to being around the youth. So they're both in a state of loneliness. And that's quite interesting. So I know Tamika and James, you guys are bubbling over with things to say. So go for it.
It just makes me think of how much trauma I would endure if I ever had to think that me being around Medea would cause her harm, would cause her pain. Something's wrong with me, so Medea can't see me, or Papa, or Grandmama, or Granddaddy. So the level of developmental trauma that could possibly be there for the children now, we might not see until down the line, where they have these experiences of feeling like, oh, I'm not enough, or a lot of this might drive kids to be lonely or put themselves. You got lonely, you got alone, and then you got I'm by myself, where people are choosing to just I'm by myself. I don't want to be around nobody because of this, because of that. And we see that a lot of times already in schools where kids isolate. You have the loner kid, you have the kid that doesn't feel like they connect and things like that. So these are some issues that could possibly come up for the children. I'm always thinking about the children. And then it's in that stage of life where a lot of grandparents are fed, are nurtured, are mentally and emotionally being held together just by the experience of seeing their grandchildren, the state of being in just pure love with their grandkids. So we hope that doesn't affect their overall health. When they see, my grandkids was the only thing that was keeping me alive. You hear that so much. Very scary. And then when we're talking about the grandkids and grandparents, but it just came to mind, what about those parents that are separated, those co-parenting parents who are saying, I can't let you go and see your dad because he's high risk, or see your mom because you're high risk. So there's so many, as we said, social issues that are going on. Now, we know we all want COVID to stop and we have to practice some isolation, but we also have to start to talk about what are the impacts of these, and then possibly come up with some solutions, and possibly come up with some processes and ways we can deal with the trauma that's going to be a response to this.
You know, I truly believe like what you said about development is big, because we're talking about people in two different developmental stages.
Right.
And so for some of our younger kiddos, I've mentioned before, our 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds are at that stage where they're learning play, they're learning social interaction through co-play. And I don't know the actual term, but they're now learning to not play in silos separated. But this is the age where they're actually supposed to be learning, taking turns, apologizing, saying, excuse me. So what happens when those children now have to figure out either how to learn that through internet or just do not have that opportunity? Second is we're dealing with adults or older adults, right? And so when we talk about Erickson's stages of development, social development, older adults are at that age where they're deciding if what they did on this earth was worth it. And a lot of times that is their grandchildren. And so we are really robbing two core age groups of what they need to develop and to feel self-actualized and to feel healthy and well through on to the next stage of their lives. And so I think that we made a lot of decisions. You know, I don't agree that I don't think people should go back to school yet, but I do think that the way that we're doing this is definitely impacting our youth as well as our adults and our elders. You know, I think about working with young people, working with girls a lot in schools. I know that for one thing, a lot of African American girls are social learners, right? So that's why they get in trouble at school, because they need to talk it out. They're talking on the side about the lesson, because that is how girls of color tend to learn, right? They're not always visual learners. They're not always kinesthetic learners, but it is that interaction, is that an engagement, is that critical thought that occurs when you bounce it off your homegirl that improves or enhances your learning. And so I wonder how that's happening right now. And I also am concerned about our kinesthetic learners, right? So a lot of our young, especially African American boys, are kinesthetic learners. That means they learn with their hands. That means they need manipulatives, they need toys, they need all these things to learn. And those aren't really happening in every district or at every school. And so what we're really dealing with is that we're stunting development. You know, the researcher Frances Cress Welsing says that African American women, per se, or women period, are stunted at the growth. Their growth is stunted at the age they have their first child. So if that's 18, you stay 18. I can't say I fully agree with that, but I think there is some merit in that, because it kind of freezes your development, because you have to put it on hold. And so COVID is freezing the development of our young people, is freezing the transition, the development of our elders. And as we make these decisions, I just think that it's so important for our politicians, our school leaders, our mental wellness leaders, our sociological professors, to really start thinking about what the long-term effects of each of these decisions is.
I want to highlight, when we talk about a lonely and alone, that in old age, as we're moving into those twilight years, there is a larger chance and happening of anxiety and depression. And that's usually because of separation, right? They've been separated from what they've known. They're separated from people dying, you know, however it ends, that they might end up alone. And I think that this exasperates that we are now looking at, I think, much more of a chance and a propensity of our elders having depression or anxiety right now because of this. So I think, you know, if we would look at, and unfortunately those statistics don't really come up for a year and a half after the fact, but I think if we were looking at who is going to see therapists or who is calling on those hotlines, I think that we're going to find that a lot of it has to do with loneliness. I know a lot of people who are not old who during this, because it happened quickly, ended up being alone for the first quarantine. I'm sorry, my note isn't working. And during that quarantine, it was devastating for those people. They were lonely. It wasn't adequate time to have that decision to say that they're alone because it happened so quickly, and then we didn't know it would be so long that we were in that initial. So what we ended up with were a lot of lonely people. And I think we still have people that are suffering through this alone. And I don't know, and as you're saying, Tamika, we've got to look at what decisions we're making. But I think, what are we going to do as a community to support this group? And I'm talking about really the older group, but these people with this loneliness issue, because you don't know that, right? What are you thinking? Because we're going to react, we're like, I just need to get out, right? It's not going to be a thought out process. I'm lonely, so I think I need to do some social interaction. It's going to be like, I'm crazy in this house and I need to get out, right? It's what it's going to be. So how do we, as a group, talk to that person that's looking at us right now and their mind is about to pop because they want some social interaction?
Yeah, you definitely brought up a key thing, and I don't have the statistics either, but I do know that our elder population is one of the populations that does struggle with suicide more so than other populations. And so that's very important because, of course, we know that isolation breeds depression and breeds suicide.
Right.
Some suggestions that I've seen are, play dates. So for grandparents, have play dates, Zoom. This is really forcing technology on everyone, right? Yeah. But Zoom play dates, or maybe you can read a book to the grandkid over the phone. There are some suggestions that say, tell them this won't be temporary. I don't think that's healthy. I do not agree with that because we don't know. And so I think it's very important, especially as we deal with young people, that we don't make promises that we can't keep. I think we look at the NBA per se, right? And the NBA is dealing with that issue now as they're in the bubble. I believe Glenn actually had some more to say about that.
Well, yes, I do. I don't want to put the cart before the horse because I want to beat up on this grandparent issue just a little bit more. Joyce, did you have something you wanted to interject?
I did, and two things that came up from Tamika and Shor. In my research, I found that since COVID started, the health community has been sending out surveys through AARP for the seniors to teachers and schools and counselors on the education end, and talking to general practice therapists every month. The pediatrics, American Medical Association Pediatrics, have been doing surveys just about every single month because of the staggering, uncontrollable impact of COVID on people, and how, going back to Shor, parents are crying out for some help. And this is where the negative, we're all in this together, comes into play. Nobody knows what to do because there's no precedent that has been set for this. We are all working through it together. So
community trauma.
That's right. So even the therapists have trauma, the doctors have trauma, the educators have trauma. Everyone's got trauma. And we're all trying to figure out that whole thing of, as I've said earlier, let's throw the spaghetti against the wall, whatever sticks, that's the solution we'll use. Tamika with 2 young children. And there's just, the statistics show that AARP, when they send out a survey, they ask the same things that Tamika talked about. Are you sleeping well? Are you struggling during the day to find something purposeful to do? Then they have solutions like call a friend, call another senior, read a book. And then California's governor, he put in he started an organization on California for All, where he's asked people to volunteer to call 1 senior a day. Thank you again, Tamika, for talking about that solution and not realizing that it's part of California. And guess how California got it? A young girl in, I believe, Milwaukee, she was always calling her grandmother. And then she said, I want to call other people. And this just spread throughout the United States to major cities, because a phone call is something for a senior to hang on to. They can hang on to that for the rest of the day and go to sleep with this good information. So that's a part of it, because every age, every population is in a trauma mode right now.
Oh, your mother.
Yeah, yeah.
No, good point. Good point. This does transcend age. And I think it's a very critical time for us to make sure that we are embracing, we're calling our mother or big mama, or even the lady down the street that always has something nice to say when I'm getting into mischief. I think that does come back to community, and that does come back to our ability to cope, but it has to be inclusive.
Yes.
We all have to own it. But I'm going to use that as the transition that Tamika graciously tried to give me, because as we're talking about community and coming together, frankly, sports is a great unifier in American culture. And right now, there is a huge schism in that unifier. Specifically, some of the National Basketball Association teams have boycotted a few games in response to the violence that we've had a chance to witness as a nation of an African-American man being shot in the back 7 times by a law enforcement official.
Yes.
There are, oh my goodness, perspectives all over the map with regards to that one singular event of violence.
It was my 13-year-old who brought that to me. I didn't know about it. And she told me, and she was, troubled. And, I went through like, hey, babe, let's not watch those videos. Let's not trigger ourselves because this is something that happens. So let's read the story. And, but it was so weird because she was approaching me knowing that mom is also often an advocate. And I think she kind of came to me like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? And so one, I kind of thought, wow, look at my kiddo getting involved and being ready to do something. And, that was big. But, so then I got the news about the NBA and their choice. And I was a little wowed, honestly. Wowed also because of the Thunder, OKC Thunder. And then, of course, Houston, which has OKC's old player, Mr. Westbrook, a Cali native, my understanding. And so I was kind of proud in that moment, right? That we're starting to move in a way that is a little more abrupt. It's more responsive, and we're not waiting for someone else to save the day for us.
Absolutely. I'll have to quote the Sterling Brown. I think he's in Milwaukee Bucks, the guard. He said, despite the overwhelming plea for change, there has been no action. So our focus today cannot be on basketball. Yeah, the Bucks. So the lieutenant governor co-signed on that. Jeannie Buss co-signed. Doc Rivers went on television last night. And I couldn't hear what the reporter was saying, but Doc said it once. He said, we want you to respect Black men, respect us. So the reporter must have asked the question again, and Doc just kind of leaned forward and repeated that. It doesn't require an entire dissertation on what you should do, points 1 through 15. Black people are being disrespected on every level. Let's stop, and I put this in quotes, playing games and get down to business, to changing.
The era of shut up and dribble's over, isn't it?
Yes,
absolutely.
it is.
Because without your players, 85% are Black or mixed or whatever you want to call it. 85% of all of the NBA and WNBA are of color. And if they sit down, they shut down all of the sport. Remember,
I'm wondering why they didn't do this already. I'm sorry. I'm thinking it's kind of late. I mean, they sent all those people to Florida. I know there was this stuff going on, and players were getting COVID in Florida. So, I mean, there is a lot to it, but I'm glad it's finally happening.
You give a person an opportunity to put their money where their mouth is. They said there's going to be change. You give them an opportunity. Again, all of the basketball players wanted to continue the season. Baseball, soccer, race car driving, all of them wanted to continue. They had their chance, but they can't do anything about a policeman who does not care about human life on any level if it's a Black person. So that's the simple answer to that. It's not a deep answer. So what do you do as a Black man who's going to stand up for other Black men? You take a strong stand. And the Bible says when you've done all you can do to stand, just stand. And this is that.
Yeah, it's impressive for me to see that these Black men are standing up and leveraging their power. A lot of these Black men have waited their whole life for the chance to play basketball. Their check, the people depend on their check. This is what they love to do, and they're standing up and leveraging that power to say what's going on is not right. And it's bigger than the violence, the shooting. It's a whole systemic issue. So this is basically, hopefully, is waking up a sleeping giant where Black people who are being oppressed can wake up and look at the systems that they are in and understand that they can make a stand. This is one piece of labor, because Black athletes, they're labor for the NBA and other assets and other ways of this industry. We have people who are not standing up. There's people who are not standing up at their job that they make 50 grand a year. There's people who can say something and step away. So these men are really stepping up and saying a lot about it. And for me personally, it feels like a Band-Aid just keeps getting ripped off a wound, not even just a bandage. And then every time they just keep ripping it off. You want to heal. You want to not be, you want your anger to move towards a solution and move towards something that can actually cause change, but it just rips you down to the emotional core again, and again. And so once again, I applaud these men for figuring out some kind of way of organizing their power, their tremendous influence, and moving together in a unit and not just saying, I'm mad, I'm angry, I'm going to do this, you do that. It's like, all right. So I don't know who got this together in the NBA.
The Milwaukee Bucks. They stayed in their locker room for several hours and decided they weren't going to play.
Mm-hmm. So,
and then it had the ripple effect.
Does anybody? The irony of them being the Bucks is not lost on me.
No, it's
just wanted to put that out there.
In several ways, huh?
Yeah.
Well, it's an animal. It's a deer. It's an animal. It's a deer. So
and it has some racial undertones as well that I will go into. So, but I like what you said. Because Shor, I was there too. So I was not only there about COVID, but just NBA. I'm not a huge sports person. And so, I mean, I've always been like, why haven't they leveraged their power all this time, as James said? But, a lot of people aren't doing that. It's exactly what he said, making $25,000 to $50,000 a year. But I think what COVID did is it desensitized them, right? So when we're afraid of something, we have an aversion to it. We don't want to lose our jobs. We don't want to not play. But when they got to feel what it felt like to not play and realize they still were alive, they still had their families, they still kept moving, they realized they could live without playing.
Right.
But what happened is when this occurred after George Floyd and all this, I think they said I can't live while my manhood and my Blackness are disrespected.
Exactly.
I think that they realize that they are more sensitive to that than they are to the sport.
Look at that.
And I saw Joyce Watkins did a talk. I watched half of it. So we know Nas and Jay-Z both dropped this weekend or in the past week, right? And so I heard Nas first, was totally in love with the song where he's saying Black King, Black Queen, deal with your trauma, all of this. And then Jay-Z and Pharrell drop Entrepreneur. And I mean, for like an entire verse, he's just saying Black man, Black man, Black man, Black man. And so I think, but what the message he's giving there is, again, to free yourself from that fear of the aversion of losing what you have. Several times there's some sort of sample in the song where someone's saying, if you want to be let out of here, just you can go, right? Because a lot of us have felt that. A lot of us who have been in a corporate situation, whether it be the NBA, as a social worker, whatever, have felt that. And so I think it was very empowering. I think what these players are doing is very empowering, is that in order to have the power that we really need we're going to have to stand on our own. We're going to have to be able to say, I don't want what you got. I will throw it away for my humanity, for my Blackness, for my whatever it is. I will let whatever you gave me go, because I can't be bought anymore.
That's real. And I think that so many artists, so many people are making that cultural shift to understand that our value as Black people are not based within this system, as it has been insinuated for this whole time. You only valuable if you're Black and you're rich, you're Black and you're famous, you're Black and you are in school, you're Black and it's no, you are just valuable as a person. So for you to step away from anything that is supposed to be the highest echelons of this system is making a statement, and no matter how it goes. For anything to shine a light on the flaws of this system and not just say, oh, you got to get yourself together and do this and do that. Like, okay, but let's look at, as you talked about even earlier, where you talking about loneliness being a state. As we are in this state where we are in this country right now, we all are experiencing a sense of loneliness where you feel like you can't connect to a person because they don't share the value of I'm a person. They just are constantly going after how can I be this or that or this or that. So this is a lonely state that we are living in lonely times until we come together and make that choice to spend that time with ourselves, to understand our true value and make those choices to be free. Feel free to feel free.
So on behalf of James Woods, Tamika Carter, Shor Denny, and Joyce Clarke, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Share the conversation. Joyce, tell them how to reach us.
Always, always. Love to hear your comments. Call us at 951-282-7173. Again, 951-282-7173. Or if you just love emails, write us at tips, T-I-P-S, .inlandempire, cal, C-A-L, @gmail.com. One more time, tips, T-I-P-S, .inlandempire, cal, C-A-L, @gmail.com. Thank you. Love to hear from you.
And in closing, as always, I encourage each and every one of you, be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.